Do or die. Those were not the words of a desperate man. Those were the words of a general who had already made his decision, who had already done the math, who had already looked at the calendar and understood with complete clarity that the time for patience was finished. The Dodgers GM stood behind that microphone and said what championship organizations only say when they mean it entirely. Everything is for the win. And then he proved it. 3 names out. 1 name in. One of MLB's elite starting pitchers, now wearing Dodger blue. A 3-for-1 trade that sent shockwaves through every front office in the league and left one person in that clubhouse standing completely still, staring at nothing, absorbing something he had not seen coming. Shohei Ohtani was stunned. Not angry. Not relieved. Stunned. And in a player who processes everything, who controls every visible reaction with the discipline of someone who has been the center of attention since he was a teenager in Japan, stunned is the word that means the most. Because when Ohtani is stunned, the rest of baseball pays attention. Let's go back to where this decision was born. It wasn't born in a single meeting. It wasn't born in one phone call or one conversation between the GM and the manager or one late-night debate in a conference room somewhere on the 3rd floor of Dodger Stadium. Decisions of this magnitude are never that clean. This one was born in the space between what the Dodgers are right now and what they need to be when October arrives. The Dodgers this season have been electric. The lineup has been dangerous. The bullpen has been reliable when it has needed to be. And Ohtani has been, as he always is, something that exists outside the normal vocabulary of baseball analysis. You run out of words for him eventually. You run out of comparisons. You run out of ways to explain to someone who doesn't watch this game every day what it looks like when a player is simply operating at a level the sport has never produced before. But rotation depth in October is a different conversation entirely. The GM was not looking at the standings when he made this call. He was looking at the bracket. He was looking at what a 7-game series demands from a pitching staff. He was looking at the calendar and doing the math that championship front offices do when the regular season starts to feel like preparation rather than destination. And the math told him something uncomfortable. Good enough wasn't good enough. Rushing was the first name confirmed. The news moved quickly, the way trade news always does, through text threads and group chats and reporters refreshing their phones every 30 seconds waiting for the official word. And when the official word came, the reaction in certain corners of the clubhouse was immediate and visible. Rushing had been a piece of something here. Not a peripheral piece. Not someone who existed on the edges of this roster without meaning or contribution. He had shown up. He had competed. He had done what professional athletes do, which is find a way to be useful inside a machine that is always moving and always demanding more. But the GM had decided he was the price. Then came Kim. 2 names in a single transaction is already significant. 2 names signals that the Dodgers were not negotiating at the margins. They were not offering what they could afford to lose without feeling it. They were offering what the other side needed to say yes. They were paying the actual price, not the comfortable price. Kim had been developing. Kim had been part of conversations about the future of this roster that extend beyond this season and into the years ahead. Giving up Kim meant giving up something real. Something that had not yet fully arrived but carried the weight of genuine possibility. The other front office knew that. That is why Kim was part of the package. And still, that wasn't enough to close the deal. The third name came quietly. Less public reaction. But those inside the building understood exactly what it meant to include that final piece. The GM was not blinking. He was sending a message to every other team watching this transaction unfold. We are serious. We are not here to almost win. We are here to win. And then the name on the other side of the trade was confirmed. One of MLB's elite starting pitchers. Not a reclamation project. Not a high-ceiling prospect who might become elite in 2 or 3 years if everything goes correctly. Not a rental arm added to stabilize a shaky rotation during a stretch of tough matchups in May or June. Elite. Present tense. Right now. The kind of arm that opposing managers lose sleep over when they see it penciled into a playoff rotation. The kind of pitcher who changes the entire calculus of a postseason series. When you add that arm to what the Dodgers already have, when you put that name in a rotation that includes what they've built, in a ballpark that carries the weight of this city's expectations, behind a lineup that features Shohei Ohtani at its center, the conversation about who is the team to beat in this league stops being a conversation. It becomes obvious. The GM knew that when he made the call. That is why he used those words at the podium. Do or die. Everything is for the win. He wasn't performing confidence. He was describing a decision already made, a direction already committed to, a cost already accepted. The question was how the people inside that clubhouse were going to receive it. Ohtani found out the way players always find out. Not first. Not in a private meeting with the front office before the news was released to the public. Not with a personal phone call from the GM explaining the reasoning and the vision and the belief that this move makes the Dodgers better in every way that matters when October arrives. He found out the way everyone finds out. And he stood still. The people around him in that moment described it the same way, independently, without comparing notes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't celebrating. He was processing something that had arrived without warning and carried more weight than a simple roster transaction. Because for Ohtani, nothing about this is simple. Rushing wasn't just a name on the roster to him. Neither was Kim. These were people he had stood next to in that dugout, people he had prepared with, competed with, pushed himself alongside during the long middle section of a baseball season that asks everything from everyone and rewards almost nobody. Losing teammates is not abstract for Ohtani. He feels it the way competitors feel everything, completely, without the protective distance that allows some people to process difficult news without visible reaction. But there was something else underneath the stillness. Something the people watching him closely could see, even if he wasn't ready to say it yet. The manager's press conference came before Ohtani spoke to anyone. He walked to that room with the specific energy of someone who had been part of this decision and believed in it fully but understood that belief alone doesn't make the human cost disappear. He respected Rushing. He respected Kim. He respected every player who had been part of building what this season has become. But he also knew what elite starting pitching means in October. A reporter asked him directly, "Is this a win-now move at the expense of the future?" He didn't hesitate. This franchise does not operate on a timeline of maybe. We are not building toward something. We are something. And when you are something, when you have the kind of talent in this clubhouse that we have, you make the moves that match what you are. You don't protect assets. You deploy them. Another reporter followed up immediately. What does this mean for the overall rotation structure going forward? How does adding this arm change how you think about pitching in October? The manager nodded. He had expected that question. When you add a true number one starter to a rotation that already has quality arms, you don't just improve the rotation. You change the conversation. You force opposing managers to burn through their best options earlier. You create matchup problems that don't have clean solutions. You make every series longer and harder for whoever has to face us. That is what we've done today. The room stayed quiet for a moment after that. Not because the answer was surprising. Because it was precise. Because it reflected the kind of clarity that shows up in organizations when everyone, from the GM to the manager to the players, is operating from the same understanding of what they are trying to accomplish. The new pitcher arrived in Los Angeles before the end of the day. There was no spectacle attached to it. No choreographed moment designed for cameras and highlight packages. He arrived the way serious players arrive when they join serious organizations, quietly, ready to work, carrying the awareness that addition carries expectation. He had been elite at his previous stop. He had done the things that elite pitchers do, dominated lineups that other starters struggled against, performed in high-leverage situations without visible deterioration, maintained his stuff deep into games when accumulation of stress would have diminished a lesser arm. Now he was here. Now he was a Dodger. Now he was walking into a clubhouse that had just absorbed the loss of 3 roster pieces and was still settling into the new reality of what this roster looked like. And the first person he would need to build something with was Shohei Ohtani. That dynamic matters more than any analytical projection. The relationship between the ace pitcher and the face of a franchise is not reducible to spin rate and exit velocity and ground ball percentage. It is something felt. Something established early in the process of becoming a team instead of a collection of individual talents. Ohtani understood that. He has always understood that. Later, when the initial wave of reaction had settled slightly, when the front office had finished its press obligations and the clubhouse had processed the first few hours of this new reality, someone asked Ohtani a direct question. "What was your reaction when you heard?" He was quiet for a moment. Not performing thoughtfulness. Actually thinking. Sorting through everything he had felt in the hours since the news arrived and finding the words that were honest without being more than he wanted to give. He spoke slowly. It is never easy when teammates leave. Those are relationships that matter. Those are people who were part of something important here. That does not disappear because a trade happened. He paused. But I also understand what this organization is trying to do. I understand what October asks of a pitching staff. I understand that the front office made a difficult decision because they believe this is what winning requires. Another pause. Longer this time. I trust that. I trust the people making these decisions. And I will be ready to compete alongside whoever is in this clubhouse. It was a careful answer. A measured answer. The kind of answer that Ohtani gives when he is still working through something privately and choosing not to share the full weight of it publicly. But the people who know him understood what the stillness had meant earlier. They understood what it means when he goes quiet in that particular way. He had felt this. He had let himself feel it. And now he was moving forward because that is the only direction he knows how to move. The Dodgers have made their statement. Not in a press release. Not in a carefully crafted organizational message distributed to beat reporters. In a transaction. In 3 names given and 1 name received. In a GM who walked to a podium and said do or die and meant every syllable. The rest of the league is watching. The other contenders who believed they were matching the Dodgers step for step through this season are now recalculating. They are sitting in their own front offices and looking at their own rosters and asking the question that this trade has forced everyone to ask. Are we doing enough? Because the Dodgers answered that question for themselves today. They looked at what they had and decided it was not sufficient for what they want. They identified the cost. They accepted the cost. They made the move. Rushing is gone. Kim is gone. The third piece is gone. One elite arm is here. Ohtani absorbed the news in silence and then chose to trust the people who made the call. And somewhere in the math of all of this, in the calculation between what was given and what was gained, in the human weight of players who leave and the competitive weight of players who arrive, the Dodgers have told everyone watching exactly who they are and exactly what they intend to do. Everything is for the win. They meant it.